That's interesting. Serial crimes will converge on extinction. That's a phrase that you couldn't even imagine before. But that sounds entirely practical to me. All right, thanks you. I just wanted to get a quick hit on that and try to connect some things I've been trying to connect. But just more generally, I think that defunding the police, if you change that into your mind, into how do you make less crime happen in the first place, then you get to defunding the police indirectly. Thank you, David. David Mittleman from Othram. David Middleman, are you there? From Othram. Now, those of you who have been watching my periscopes, you are familiar. I think you've heard of Othram, Othram. And can you explain what Othram does for those who haven't heard? Just the quick summary of what the company does.
Yeah, what we do at Othram is we're a forensics laboratory that develops identities for people that are either victims or perpetrators of crimes. And we can analyze a crime scene sample, look at the DNA, figure out who was involved in the crime, even if they're not in the FBI CODIS system or the traditional forensic database.
So the basic idea is that the regular police have a database of people who have been arrested or convicted.
Generally you end up in the CODA system if you've been convicted, and
Okay.
it varies from state to state. Sometimes you're convicted but you still don't make it into the database, and sometimes there's ways to get the database upon arrest. So
So
yeah.
So the police have this very small, limited database, and if they get lucky, they get some DNA at a crime scene, and by chance, it's somebody who already committed a crime, already was convicted, and they had their DNA, and they got in the database, and they checked it. But with your company, you have a broader net, and describe just as quickly why you can get more DNA samples than the police. Why do you have access to more stuff?
We use a different process. The police, as you noted, the FBI system indexes you on a few markers and then tracks folks that commit repeat crime. What we're able to do is we're able to get all the genomic information from a crime scene sample and then use that to do relationship testing and look even for distant relatives that might be connected and help us figure out where the unknown person might fit on a family tree. So you can imagine that even the smallest scrap of information can be useful in finding someone that is even remotely connected to you, and any of those relationships can help us essentially triangulate or reverse engineer an identity, or at least a nearest relative.
All right, now let me tie this into the headlines to make this relevant to all of you. The big conversation in the news is defunding the police. And that sounds crazy, right? Who wants less police when you have just as much crime? But I think that actually there is a smart way to do it. And the smart way to do it is to create situations in which getting away with a crime is effectively impossible. So as you drive toward it's impossible to get away with it, in theory, the number of people who try a crime that they know they'll get caught for should go down, and therefore the number of police you need should go down. So this is one of, there are probably a dozen technologies in private companies that police do not have direct access to. Everything from facial recognition to drone things and now DNA technologies. But there are a number of technologies that could drive the ability to get away with a crime really close to zero. And I don't think you'd have to get all the way to Big Brother. So I see some comments saying that. And this is relevant because in the news, Ivanka Trump is spearheading I guess, an effort to try to solve a bunch of cold cases, specifically for the Native American community and the Alaska Natives, because I guess it's an underserved community, and they have all these DNA and cold case samples, and that they can't solve. So, how many of these cold cases, in the sense of if they have some DNA from the case, what percentage of all these cases that Ivanka is targeting to get some resolution to, what percentage of those do you think Othram could solve if you were brought into this?
I think that on the upfront side, you would probably solve, you know, somewhere close to 75%, and then it'll converge very closely at over 90%. And that's in contrast to what you would see with like a typical system right now, where sex assault reveals identity through CODIS 15% of the time,
Right.
and unidentified remain is like 1% of the time.
All right, now put yourself in the head of a criminal, and you've got two possibilities. The old way is that there was a 15% chance of getting caught for, let's say, some violent crime that would leave your DNA. But what happens if it goes to 90 or 100%? Are you exactly as likely to do the crime? Well, if it's a crime of passion, or you're crazy, or it's revenge or something, maybe yes. But I gotta think that if there were a steady stream of reports of cold cases being solved, what does that do to your mental understanding of risk, right? So, David, would you imagine that there will be lots of stories coming out of the kind you're describing, where a really cold case that couldn't be solved suddenly is easy to solve? And what's that going to do to the criminal mind? Is something like that coming?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a steady flow of cases that are being solved. We've got dozens that are going to be announced in the next month or two, and I think what that does is, people have argued: do we have stricter punishment? Do we have what demotivates people to commit crime? And I think severity of punishment hasn't been very effective. But I think
Right.
knowing that you're going to get caught, I think is a huge deterrent. And at this point, if you're going to leave, whether on purpose or by accident, DNA somewhere, there's almost a certainty that you'll be caught, if not immediately, very soon. The technology continues to develop, and so I think it's going to make people think twice. Certainly,
Yeah.
it's going to retire the idea of I think repeat crime or serial crimes will probably converge on extinction.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Serial crimes will converge on extinction. That's a phrase that you couldn't even imagine before. But that sounds entirely practical to me. All right, thanks you. I just wanted to get a quick hit on that and try to connect some things I've been trying to connect. But just more generally, I think that defunding the police, if you change that into your mind, into how do you make less crime happen in the first place, then you get to defunding the police indirectly. Thank you, David. David Mittleman from Othram, Othram.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
coming. All right.